Hey guys, so today we're going to talk about the interview. There's a lot that goes into the process of interviewing. You have the looking for the job, you have the submittal process, you have the actual interview, and then you have the post interview. So let's get started and talk about the submittal. Before your submittal, if there's a job I find that I'm interested in, I do a real quick search for housing in that area before I even submit. I don't know why, but it seems like sometimes housing is the biggest holdup with taking a contract. So if there's a job in a unique place like Tuba City, Arizona, or somewhere weird, I like to go ahead and look up on Furnish Finder, Airbnb, Craigslist, wherever I can find housing for, to see if there are actual housing options there or not, because sometimes not being able to find housing is going to be a deterrent in you even submitting to a contract. And the last thing you want to do is submit and not have done your homework real quick on the housing situation there, and then plan to take the housing stipend, and when the time comes you can't find any. So then you're stuck in a hotel for the next 13 weeks, because your company is going to put you up somewhere at that point. Which, if you're fine with that and you like the hotel lifestyle and you don't like the fuss of having to try to find your own housing, go for it. But I think most people would agree that the housing stipend is kind of where it's at, because they give you more money than you would typically need, and that's more money that goes into your pocket if you choose the housing stipend option. So my first recommendation is that no matter where you're looking for housing, just do a quick 5-minute search to make sure housing is available before you pull the trigger on sending a submittal over. Also, if housing is scarce and you're having a hard time finding something outside of a hotel option and that hotel is just not going to work for you, you can always ask your recruiter what kind of housing resources they have. A lot of companies, like I mentioned in a couple of videos ago, will have housing concierge services, or they will have resources for housing for their travelers, whether it be long-term stay discounts or partnerships with different facilities. Another tip before the submittal that I would suggest is to make sure you're actually qualified for the job that you're submitting to. I know that sounds super simple and obvious, but sometimes your recruiter will just submit you to every job that's out there without really looking at what the qualifications are. Almost every place will say a minimum of 2 years experience is required. A lot of places will take you with only 1 year of experience, especially teaching hospitals or big trauma centers who have a lot of new grads, have a lot of residents in there. So 2 years is not a hard stop, but what you'll find is some hospitals will require 3 to 5 years from travelers. And sometimes it'll be clearly listed saying 3 to 5 years required. Sometimes companies and recruiters will just be like, oh, we'll wing it and see if they take you anyway. It's a waste of your time. It's a waste of your time. It's a waste of the company's time for you to submit to those jobs. So make sure that your recruiter is really submitting you for things that you truly do qualify for, and not just blanket applying you to everything and wasting people's time. I mean, if you want to go for those things, go for it. In 7 years, that has never panned out for me personally. So if there's a job I really wanted and I've applied to it, even though I didn't have enough experience, it's always gotten kicked back. I just think it's better for you to commit your time and effort and energy to the things that you are a good candidate for, that are already out there. So I think my last tip before the submittal would be to really make sure that you're submitting to jobs that you're comfortable submitting to. Don't just submit to something because your recruiter is pushing for it, because they're saying this is the only opportunity you'll get, or this is the only job out there, or whatever they're going to use car salesman approach you to get you to commit to. Only go after the things that you really can make a full commitment to and things that you are comfortable with. Don't let anybody pressure you to submit to a job or to accept a job that you don't want. Period. You have to be your own advocate, so you do what's best for you. Let's talk about before the interview. Now that you've submitted, you're waiting for the manager or the hiring recruiter to call you. This can be one of the most anxiety-provoking periods of your life to go through when you are, especially when you're a first traveler and you are submitting to your first contract, and there's all this excitement and nervousness and anxiety related to it. And sometimes the manager can get your profile It can sit on their desk for a few days, sometimes a week. If they are on vacation, it'll sit there even longer. It feels like you're gonna feel like nobody's gonna want you. Nobody wants to call you. You're not qualified. There's no way you're gonna get it. You're gonna have all these feelings of doubt. Don't feel that way. Just know that you have to be very patient with this whole submittal, interview, post-interview process. It can take some time. This isn't the case every single time. It tends to work out that it's a few days long process most of the time. But while you're waiting, go ahead and learn about the facility that you've submitted to. Go ahead and do your homework. Go ahead and look up their vision, their mission, their values. Do some homework. Find out what find out how many beds they are. Find out what level of trauma they are. Find out information about this place so that you can be prepared when they do call you for the interview and you can know what to expect. A good example is I went to Aspirus Hospital in Ironwood, Michigan. I did not know a single thing about Aspirus as a whole, so I went ahead and looked them up while I was waiting for the interview. I learned about their vision, I learned about their mission, and I learned about their core values. And then when it came time for the interview, I could play on those things and say, like, my values are in line with your facility's values, which are blah, 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 blah. Like, you can make yourself look like you did your homework because you did. And the facilities will take note of that and they will appreciate that. It definitely shows that you're interested in the facility and that you're willing to put in the work to get to know them. My biggest suggestion to you, number one suggestion before the interview process, is to contemplate your strengths and weaknesses and anticipate that as an interview question. That is probably the number one question you will ever get in every single interview you will ever go through is tell me about yourself, tell me about your strengths, and tell me about your weaknesses. It's one of those questions that we all have an answer to, but for some reason it always kind of puts people off. You know, it's just one of those questions that you have to sit there and think about it even though you know what your weaknesses are, but you don't want to make yourself sound dumb because you have weaknesses, but we all have them. So my suggestion for that would, while you're contemplating your strengths and your weaknesses, make sure you are honest about your weaknesses. Follow up your weakness statement with testimony about working to improve that weakness. For example, I'm not strong in X skill. However, I've been finding opportunities to participate in improving said skill. That will show that you are a human, that you do have weaknesses, but you are taking proactive steps to improve those weaknesses and turn them into strengths. That's a great, solid answer. Companies will appreciate that. Whoever's listening to you doing the interview will be like, okay, this person, they know what their strengths and weaknesses are, and they know how to go about improving those. So that's just a good interview technique, I guess I could give you, advice I could give you. Another thing that I have found very helpful is to write out interview questions, things that I want answered by the interviewer. So if I have very specific questions, albeit silly, like what are your scrub colors, or what is your nurse-patient ratio, which isn't a silly question nowadays with COVID, but or do you have ancillary staff like CNAs or EMTs or whatever your questions may be that you have, or can you do block scheduling? I have a Google Doc that has interview questions. What I will do is I will real quick print that out if I'm expecting a call for an interview. I will go ahead and fill in the blanks on the things that I was able to look up on the internet about the hospital. Then during the interview, I will go ahead and jot down answers to questions that typically get answered without even having to ask them. And then at the end of the interview, when the manager opens it up for questions, I will go ahead and ask the remaining questions that don't have answers, and just to fill in the rest of those blanks, just so I have a thorough, comprehensive understanding of everything related to that hospital or that facility or that department. What I can do is I can go ahead and put a link in the description box down below. Hi, editing Kayla here. I actually do not have that link for that Google Doc, but if you will email me,
at my work email address, travelnursekayla@gmail.com, I will happily forward you a copy of that document so you can use it in your interview.
I actually have one for the ER, and then I have another one for the OR because my boyfriend also likes to use that template when he's doing interviews as well. And he has found that to be incredibly helpful just as much as I have. So I will go ahead and link that down below, and you can use it as you like. Before the interview, you also want to make sure that you have an idea of any requested time off, RTO. You want to make sure that there are days, if you need them off, that you discuss those during the interview with the manager. Requesting time off doesn't automatically exclude you from employment at all. If it's around a holiday, sometimes they like to have travelers work holidays so that their permanent staff could have the days off. So you could always request those days off if it's holidays. If it's a holiday, the worst they'll say is no, and the best they'll say is yes. So you can always ask. It doesn't hurt to ask. But make sure you have an idea. So if they say, hey, are you going to need any time off? You say, oh, I need this day through that day, or whatever. And they'll say, okay, we'll work around it. Or typically there's not an issue with that. I've actually only worked through like one holiday ever, and all the other ones I've been able to request off. So typically it's not a big deal as long as you ask in advance about it and you get it in writing in the contract. During the interview, you're going to want to sell yourself, but do not misrepresent yourself. Don't say that you know everything about OB or that you're comfortable with OB if you've never had an OB patient. I know this is obvious, but it happens. Don't lie about what you know. If you don't know something, just say, I don't know something, but I'd like to learn more about it, or I don't know something, but I've seen this a couple times, or whatever you need to say. But make sure that you're not representing who you are, what your skill set is, or what your knowledge base is. When they ask, talk about your experiences, talk about your skills. Go ahead and sell yourself. That's what I'm saying though. Just don't make stuff up. Now let's talk about the post-interview process. This is gonna be just as nerve-wracking as the pre-interview phase. Like, you are gonna feel like, oh, I didn't do a good job, or they're not gonna want me, or they're gonna not think I'm up to par, or whatever you're gonna be thinking negatively about yourself. Just stop. You did great. If they called you, it means they want you. Unless you completely bombed and did the worst interview in the history of interviews, you have a chance. You're probably going to get it. It's okay. It's okay. Just take a breath. So I know waiting to hear back from the facility and from your company after the interview can be so stressful. You're going to be thinking like, when are they going to send the offer? Did they decide they didn't want me? Did I totally bomb this interview, etc.? No. Sometimes it can take a day or two to get everything sorted out, to get the offer sent over to your company from the facility. A lot of times the managers or the interviewer will say, I'm going to go ahead and get everything drafted up and sent over. You know, it was great talking to you. We'll talk soon, whatever. That's usually their spiel at the end. That means you're good. That means you got it. Don't even worry about it. You're good to go. But just know it can take like a day or two, depending on how busy everybody is and what's going on, for that offer to get over to you. A lot of times you will check in with your recruiter, say, hey, I just finished the interview. I think it went okay. They said they're gonna send over a contract. Then that lets your recruiter know to be looking for that, to get it over to you as quickly as possible so that you can get it signed. Usually, historically, you have 24 hours to sign a contract before it's declared a declination of the contract. So it behooves you to make sure your housing is squared away, you at least have a plan there, you are fully committed to this contract, and then go ahead and sign that sucker, get it done. Make sure that you lock it down, but just know that with a lot of COVID crisis contracts, usually it's pretty immediate. Like, as soon as they send you an offer, you need to review that contract and send it back stat, because it's rapid or immediate deployments. But with a traditional contract, you've got on average about 24 hours to send that back. So when you're reviewing the contract, make sure it has the correct pay rate, correct overtime, correct stipends, correct shift. Sometimes the wrong shift will be in there and then you're stuck working the wrong shift. So make sure that's obviously the correct shift you interviewed for and anticipating working. Make sure that your requested time off has been documented, the correct dates, and it has been approved. make sure the contract length is correct, and make sure that anything that is incorrect gets corrected before you sign the contract. Before you sign the contract. I mean, for the people in the back, let me say it again, make sure anything that's wrong is right before you sign. Period. Once you sign that contract, it is a legally binding document, and to get things corrected is like pulling teeth. I don't care what company you're with. It's kind of like, oh, well, you signed it. I mean, and that's from the hospital's standpoint on that, you know? So just make sure everything is accurate. And then sign that sucker, and then get your stuff packed and get on the road and get going. Like, have fun. You can breathe a sigh of relief to know that your contract is signed, you are on your way to a new beginning, and you are good to go. I hope this interview technique information was good. It will help you. It will help calm your nerves if you're a first timer looking to submit and start your travel experience. I wish you luck, happy travels, and I'll see you in the next video.